You're listening to an encore presentation of Disclosure.
Welcome to Disclosure. I am your host for today's program, Jean Boonstra. Disclosure is brought to you by the Voice of Prophecy. Now, the Voice of Prophecy has been on the air for many years, over 85 years now. And Disclosure is one of the new offerings brought to you by this ministry. And I am happy to welcome you to today's program from beautiful Loveland, Colorado, where it is a sunny day, where it is often a sunny day in Colorado. And my guest today is Jennifer Jill Schwerzer, and you might remember her from a program that Sean and I did with Jennifer. I'm not sure, about 4, 5, 6 weeks ago now, maybe a little bit more. And we talked about anxiety and a couple of other issues. And Sean and I really enjoyed our experience talking to Jennifer. We felt she was very, very informed, very balanced, very dedicated to what she does. And we thought we need to have her back on the program soon. And so here we are again today. Jennifer, welcome back to Disclosure.
It's good to be here.
Well, Jennifer, since we talked last, you have relocated and you are now in Orlando, Florida.
I am, that's right. And I drove the truck down by myself.
Good for you. That's fantastic. So there in Orlando, Florida, you stay busy. You are an author, you are a psychotherapist. And what I wanted to ask you about today, Jennifer, because it's the new year, the season has changed, weather maybe not in Orlando, Florida. You're probably still pretty nice and warm there.
Gorgeous. It's the best time of year here.
That's true. Winter is perfection in Florida.
Yeah.
But, you know, where I grew up in Canada and much of North America, it's cold, the days are short, and I think January too, sometimes people have a lot of dread. We've all enjoyed the holidays, and then January, you know, no more lights in the evening. All the bills come due from all of our celebrations, and I think people call it sometimes the winter blues. And you know, yeah. And it's not people's favorite time of the year. And you know, I have to say, in my personal experience, years ago when Sean and I lived up in the far north of British Columbia there in Canada, January was a tough month for me. It was. Living up there, the sun didn't rise until about 10 in the morning, and it went down well before 4, probably closer to around 3.
Oh, wow.
And for me, that was before we had kids, and Sean was often gone off to visit one of his 3 churches, and I had a job where I didn't have a window in my office. And so I would go there in the dark, I would leave there in the dark, and if I didn't force myself at lunchtime to bundle up in my parka and my scarf and my big old clunky winter boots, I wouldn't see the sun all day. And those were long days. Now, we weren't there very long. We only spent 2 winters up there. And so I don't feel, I don't feel like it really affected me much. But I wonder if I'd lived there long term, what my experience would have been. And I hear people talk about these winter blues, and I think probably maybe some of our listeners, Jennifer, are experiencing similar to what I described. So tell me, are these winter blues, is that a real thing?
Oh, definitely a real thing. It's anecdotally and, just a human experience, been around for centuries, but it was actually coined as a disorder in 1984 by a man named Norman Rosenthal, a medical doctor, and he called it seasonal affective disorder, or SAD.
It's an accurate acronym, isn't it?
Accurately, I don't know what does.
Sure.
So,
okay.
And of course, that would be a clinical level. Now, there's just winter blues or winter blahs that aren't, sufficient for a clinical diagnosis. But if it gets bad enough, it can be a diagnosis, and seasonal affective is that diagnosis. Yes.
Okay, so seasonal
Hmm.
affective disorder, officially
Hmm.
named in 1984.
84. That's right.
Okay, so
Hmm.
relatively newly diagnosed, but as you
Hmm.
said, anecdotally, lots of
Hmm.
evidence of it. So tell us a
Yeah,
little bit.
cabin fever is another,
Oh,
another kind of
true.
term. Cabin fever, people that live in cold climates start crawling up the walls because you don't go outside because it's so cold.
Mm-hmm.
And your mood is affected by the lack of bright light exposure, and then things go downhill from there.
Right, right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So tell us a little bit about this disorder. What does it look like? What are some of the things that define it?
Sure. It's a subtype of depression that occurs during the fall and winter when the days get shorter and the days get darker. So it's going to look pretty much like depression.
Hmm.
Lack
Okay.
of motivation, either oversleeping or undersleeping, depending on the person. Some people medicate with food. Some people medicate. They lose their appetite. Um, Melancholic thoughts, withdrawal. It's a worst case scenario, withdrawal from other people. And these types of manifestations are typical of depression. It's going to be the same thing. The reason it's called seasonal affective is because of what causes it. So it's really a subtype of major depressive disorder.
Okay. And that makes sense.
Mm-hmm.
So what is it that really affects people to experience these symptoms of major depression? Is it the lack of sunlight?
It is. That's the that's basically in a nutshell what causes it. But we can be augmented, if I could say it that way, by biological predisposition
Mm.
and stress. So basically, what happens is a lack of sunlight. And two things happen. The days are shorter, it's just generally darker, there's not as much light, and it gets colder, so people are less inclined to go outside. And some people just don't go outside. They go to the gym to exercise. They don't bundle up like you did, which was actually very wise.
Okay,
Even
good.
though it's freezing out there, it's the wise thing to do because of the fresh air and the bright light. But people tend not to do that. They go to the gym these days to exercise, if they exercise at all. So people, as a result, will get almost no sunlight exposure or no bright light exposure. And as a result of that, the serotonin balance of the brain gets thrown off. Bright light exposure increases serotonin. Serotonin is the mood regulating neurotransmitter or brain chemical that helps your mood stabilize and be in a positive kind of even keel kind of state. And
Mm-hmm.
that gets thrown off by the lack of sunlight. And so the mood will go down as a result of low serotonin.
Mm-hmm.
So add to that biological predisposition, which, by the way, is stronger in women. Women are more often depressed. They have lower brain serotonin than men, and more depression,
Hmm.
more anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
and they're more vulnerable to SAD, seasonal affective.
Interesting.
So, and then, of course, people who come from families where there are various or, one type or another of affective disorder, depression, bipolar, these types of things all over the family tree, they're going to be more predisposed to developing seasonal affective as well.
Okay.
And then
Okay.
you add the factor of stress, which is interesting. You said people cheer up at the holidays. Some people have the opposite experience. They
That's true.
dread at the holidays, depending
Mm-hmm.
on the condition of their family
Sure.
relationship.
Yeah.
So,
Or if they've
and sometimes just the extreme pressure to please everyone and get the right present, all the things that come with our extremely materialistic approach to Christmas can really bother people and create a lot of stress in their lives.
yeah. Yeah.
It's kind of a
Absolutely.
perfect storm.
Right, right. So the
Mm-hmm.
days are shortening. Well, yes, because
Mm-hmm.
this is not just a January problem. This is just a
Mm-hmm.
short day. So
Mm-hmm.
in the holidays, you're right. You have that perfect storm of that
Mm-hmm.
stress. I think of a person who maybe has just lost a spouse or a loved one.
Mm-hmm.
The holidays, how difficult they would be. And then
Yeah.
I don't know, I think often too that carries over into January because as you mentioned, that pressure to create. I think as females too, probably we feel this the most. We feel this pressure to create the perfect memories, the perfect background, the perfect meal, the perfect everything. And I don't know that we end up enjoying the holidays as much as we should.
You are so spot on. And, one of the tragedies of this is that people will try to create all that perfection, often in the context of families that are far from perfect in terms of the relationship. And so there's all this pressure to make things look good. But often there's what I call a bonding failure, especially if people are visiting family. It's the only time of the year they see family, and they really don't have close bonds with family members, but they're kind of forced into each other's company just by the convention of it. This can be particularly hard on women who are relationally wired and want so desperately for everybody to love everybody,
Right.
And so we knock ourselves out trying to get that to happen, and it doesn't always happen. So then you're right, January and February can be a time of reflecting back on those difficult realities. And then the cold and the dark, it can be a perfect storm and send women into a downward spiral. Women are 4 times as likely to develop seasonal affective, by the way.
4 times. That's very significant.
Yeah.
So we are naturally then, did I hear you say that we naturally produce less serotonin? And so we're biologically, so we're biologically more predisposed to the effects of the lack of sunlight. I liked a phrase you used just a minute ago. You said that at the holidays there's that bonding failure because we're sort of all forced together, but it's not necessarily natural. And then I know myself, and I like to think I don't put a whole lot of pressure on the holidays, and I try and focus just on the kids more than anything. But often, even when I think that it's been a great, successful holiday season, I look back in January or February and I think, I wish this had been done a different way. And sometimes I even sort of beat myself up a little bit because I didn't just sit down and enjoy it. So there's a lot of spillover. Well, Jennifer, we're going to take a little break here, but we've already started to unpack this winter blues. If you are listening and you're struggling right now, it's the new year, the days are short, and life is just feeling a little bit overwhelming. Well, you are not alone. This is not just in your imagination. These winter blues are real, and it's something that, as Jennifer just shared with us, was named. It's a disorder, seasonal affective disorder, named back in 1984, not that long ago, relatively recent history. Well, if you're listening and you want to also learn a little bit more about what Jennifer does, maybe you're in the Orlando area. She does have a website, jenniferjill.org. Did I get that right, Jennifer?
You did.
Okay, jenniferjill.org. And there, Jennifer, just in 20 or 30 seconds, tell us what people can find when they visit your website.
They can find a description of who I am, what I do. They can find links to the various aspects of my ministries and products that I sell, books that are available, DVDs, CDs, and just general good stuff.
Wonderful. Good. Well, you are sharing some really helpful information already. So thank you, Jennifer, for being with us. And those of you listening, stay with us through this short break. We have some information that I don't want you to miss. This offer from the Voice of Prophecy, matched with what you're learning here about seasonal affective disorder, maybe put together, might just be what you are looking for in this new year. I'm Jean Boonstra. You're listening to Disclosure. We'll be right back in just a couple of minutes.
Are you searching for answers to life's toughest questions like, where is God when we suffer? Can I find real happiness, or is there any hope for our chaotic world? The Discover Bible Guides will help you find the answers you're looking for. Visit us at BibleStudies.com or give us a call at 888-456-7933 for your free Discover Bible Guides. Study online on our secure website or have the free guides mailed right to your home. There is never a cost or obligation. The Discover Bible Guides are our free gift to you. Find answers in guides like, Does my life really matter to God? And A Second Chance at Life. You'll find answers to the things that matter most to you in each of the 26 Discover Bible Guides. Visit BibleStudies.com and begin your journey today to discover answers to life's deepest questions.
Welcome back to Disclosure. I'm your host for today's program, Jean Boonstra. And it's a new year and it's chilly here in Colorado. It's sunny, but it's chilly. And our studios are situated here in our offices in Loveland, Colorado, right next to a long hallway that goes underneath. We call it the tunnel. And it's a little chilly, but I have a wonderful shawl that I keep here in the studio now to keep me warm that one of our wonderful sponsors crocheted for me. And if you are listening, you can't see it, but we have cameras here in the studio. And if you're watching, I want to show you this shawl. Aren't the colors beautiful? And it's just perfect for this time of year to keep me warm. So our wonderful sponsor who made it for me, if she's watching, she knows who she is. Well, my guest today is Jennifer Jill Schwerzer. Jennifer, I'm glad you're with me today on our program.
Good to be here.
Well, before our break, Jennifer, we were talking about seasonal affective disorder, and you mentioned something that really caught my interest. You said that women in particular are 4 times more likely to suffer from this than men. So tell me, what is the prevalence of seasonal affective disorder?
I think that I actually don't have any hard statistics on exactly how many people and where, but I know it's more prevalent, obviously, in areas of the world where there's shorter days and more cold weather. And I do know that women are much more inclined to. I'm sorry, I didn't get the statistics on that.
Oh, no, that's okay. Just in general terms.
But yeah, it's obviously much more prevalent in the North Country, and that's why I moved to Orlando.
You're smart. You're very smart.
Well, and that's actually one of the treatments. If all else fails, Dr. Rosenthal, who coined the term seasonal affective disorder, recommends that if all else fails, just move to a warmer part of the country and a part of the country where you can have more daylight.
Okay, so further
you can
south.
Get outside more.
Okay.
Yeah.
So this is something that people in the northern parts of North America, Europe, I assume, wherever humans are in situations where they have cold weather and short days, this disorder occurs. Would that be a correct assumption?
Yes, and I really think it's kind of echoes of the fall in Eden, where there was this perfect world where I'm sure they got lots of bright light exposure, and our brains were created for that bright light and for long days and not cold weather, for moderate weather and being outside all the time. And then the fall came and brought with it, all the things we see around us, including inclement weather, and drove people inside. And I really think, like the Bible says, the whole creation groans and travails together, waiting for the revealing of the sons of God, or something to that effect. I think the creation, including our brain chemistry, is kind of groaning under the weight of our fallen condition. And I think that seasonal affective is sort of echoes of what we were created for, which is a world of perfect moderate climate and lots of sunlight. And so I think that we can fight this, but we have to fight it with the tools that are going to correct that, including bright light exposure and including getting outside. So that's the primary treatment for seasonal affective is bright light exposure.
Okay. And that makes sense. We weren't created for exactly this kind of world that we live in, were we? We were created for a perfect world.
That's right.
And having more exposure to light, we know, science certainly backs up the fact that getting that vitamin D from the light and
Mhm.
getting
Mhm.
outside in the fresh air, of course, is all better for us, better for our brain development. I
Mhm.
think, Jennifer, here in Colorado, our
Mhm.
shortest day, like most places in the northern climate, is towards the end of December.
Mhm.
And I actually looked it up because I was curious. I've only been in Colorado 2 years, and I thought, I wonder how long the shortest day in Colorado is. And it was 9
Yeah.
hours and 21 minutes of daylight, which, in some ways doesn't sound too short. But then when you think about how quickly those 9 hours are consumed in just work and
Mhm.
day-to-day tasks, that
Mhm.
that represents the sun rising at 7:20 in the morning and then setting again at 4:40 in the
Mhm.
afternoon.
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
Thankfully, the
Mhm.
thing I really enjoy about Colorado is we do get a lot of sunshine. So even
Mhm.
when those days are short, they're often sunny. What
Mhm.
about people who are living I think of where I used to live also, which is in like the Pacific Northwest, where even when
Mhm.
the days lengthen, the amount of
Mhm.
sunshine is very, very
Mhm.
limited. Do they have the same type of experience with seasonal
Not
affective?
as much. It's
Okay.
not really about sunshine per se as much as it's about bright light, from what I understand. So when I help people treat depression or seasonal affective, I encourage them to go outside.
Mm-hmm.
And even if it's overcast, I tell them that they're going to get that bright light exposure. We don't realize how much brighter it is outside, even when it's overcast, but it is.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's of course going to be ideal if you've got the sunbeams coming down and so forth, but it's also beneficial to get outside even when it's a cloudy day,
Mm-hmm.
because that is
Okay.
going to be significantly brighter light. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Yeah.
Hmm.
So just get outside. Even if it's cloudy, you're getting a lot more sunlight exposure than you would be sitting inside.
That's right. That's
Okay.
right.
Okay.
And particularly, apparently, getting outside first thing in the morning is more effective for some reason. From what I understand, bright light exposure within a half hour of waking up in the morning is going to increase your serotonin levels, and that serotonin is later going to become melatonin. So I can remember, and that's going to help you sleep, by the way. I can
Mm-hmm.
remember having an episode, an interpersonal issue in my life, and really struggling to get past it and feeling really depressed about it. And I heard that, and I decided that instead of my daily workout in the afternoon, I would do it in the morning, and I would go running first
Mm-hmm.
thing in the morning. And I started doing that, and I was able to get the depression behind me as a result
Wow.
of that bright light exposure first thing in the morning. There is something about that, having so to speak a fresh brain and taking it outside first thing in the morning, that really helps enhance brain chemistry.
Okay. So that really
Yeah.
made a difference. Even you
Mm-hmm. It
experienced
did.
that personally. So you put your
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
clinical advice
Oh
to the
yeah.
test, and you found out
Oh
that it
yeah.
worked.
It did.
That's good. That's
I've
good.
got to practice what I preach, or I'll soon cease to be authentic. Yeah.
Yeah, you do. That's very true.
Mhm.
Very true.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
getting outside in the morning, even if it's
Yeah.
cloudy, that's going to
Yeah.
help with those serotonin levels. And then you mentioned something else that I think was important, which is the melatonin, which is going to help you sleep. Because
Mhm.
one of the symptoms you mentioned in the first segment was
Yeah.
potentially either too much sleep or a lack of sleep. So that would
That's
help
right.
with that symptom as well, wouldn't it?
Disrupted sleep. That's right. And so melatonin is what's responsible for helping us knock off at night. We got to go to sleep at night, and we're going to want more brain melatonin, and serotonin, from what I understand, becomes melatonin. So when you have
Okay.
deficiency of serotonin, you're going to have less melatonin, and this is why some people they get insomnia when they get depressed.
Oh, interesting. Interesting.
So getting outside does a lot of things for people. We don't realize how effective it is. But just to walk in nature, number one,
Mm.
you're getting the bright light exposure. Number two, you're getting fresh air, unless you live in a sewer or something. But most part, you're going to get somewhat fresh air.
Mhm.
Thirdly, you're going to get exposed to nature. Even if you don't live in the country, you can find a park, or even just seeing trees as you're walking down the road. And seeing beautiful things and things of nature is very restful to the mind. It reminds us of the Creator. And another really interesting benefit from walking is, and let me say this about walking before I explain that benefit.
Sure.
So the best exercise program is the one we stick to. And sometimes people make their exercise programs so difficult that they don't stick to them. So I recommend walking for everyone, because very few people are going to have to just grit their teeth and force themselves to go for a walk. It's pretty easy to do, and it's not likely to become grueling for you. And you're not as likely, I don't think, to fall off the wagon, so to speak, if your daily routine is just to walk. So I think it's really important that people not undervalue walking. It exercises every muscle in the body. So another secondary benefit of walking is that apparently moving the eyes across the field of vision increases brain processing capacity by bilateralizing the brain. And even the action of walking, where you're stepping on one foot then the other and swinging your arms, you're actually stimulating both sides of your body, and that leads to stimulation of both hemispheres of the brain. And this has been shown to help increase the brain's ability to process difficult material, even trauma. I treat trauma clients that have trauma by having them walk and talk through the trauma as they're walking, because we find that helps their brain process the event better, particularly when you're looking across the field of vision at the bird over there and the tree swaying in the wind over there and the sunlight over there, kind of moving your eyes around. That seems to put the brain in a condition where it can function and works better for us, so to speak.
Wow.
There's a lot of benefits
Yeah.
to just putting on your shoes and your coat and getting outside
Just
and walking.
getting out there. I didn't realize there was a scientific reason for what you're just explaining, but I know if I've been struggling over something, whether it's a personal issue, or maybe I'm trying to find the right wording for something I'm working on, a work project, if I just go for a walk, very often it's like the cobwebs disappear and I'm able to find solutions for what I was looking for. And now I understand why.
There's reasons for it, and also to calm down if you're in an escalated situation, you're about to have conflict or explode or get irritable, or whatever, in a board meeting or something. Sometimes a 10-minute walk will prevent disaster.
Yeah. Walking it off, literally.
That's right.
Yeah.
If you're a hothead like me, you need that often.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, this is wonderful, Jennifer. I think we've just started to talk about something that's really important, which is if an individual is suffering from the symptoms of seasonal affective disorder, how do they treat it? So we're going to take a little break. When we come back, I want to dig into that a little bit deeper and talk about some of the things that you would offer to people, to patients that you see in your practice. So if you're listening, stay with us here. And if for some reason the station that you're listening to, we go off the air, well, that's okay. You can pick up the rest of our program right on our website, vop.com/disclosure. And there you will find this episode with Jennifer Jill, where we're talking about seasonal affective disorder, and also all of our other episodes, including the program Sean and I did with Jennifer about anxiety, which is also fascinating. Some wonderful material there that she shared. So we're going to take this short break, but please stay with us here at Disclosure. We're talking about how we as Christians can learn a little more about this disorder and how we can be equipped to handle it and deal with it as God has planned for our lives, our purpose. So stay with us. We'll be right back in just a few seconds. Are you searching for answers to life's toughest questions? Like, where is God when we suffer? Can I find real happiness? Or is there any hope for our chaotic world? The Discover Bible Guides will help you find the answers that you're looking for. Visit us at BibleStudies.com or give us a call at 888-456-7933 for your free Discover Bible Guides. Study online on our secure website or have the free guides mailed right to your home.
There is never a cost or obligation. The Discover Bible Guides are our free gift to you. Find answers in guides like Does My Life Really Matter to God? And A Second Chance at Life. You'll find answers to the things that matter the most to you. Visit BibleStudies.com and begin your journey today to discover answers to life's deepest questions.
Welcome back to Disclosure. I'm your host for today's program, Jean Boonstra, and my guest today is psychotherapist and author Jennifer Jill Schwerzer. Jennifer, glad you're with us on Disclosure today.
Great to be here.
Well, you and I are talking about something that I think is really, really important, especially this time of year as the days are short and the weather is cold, other than in beautiful Orlando, Florida, where you are located.
Lucky me.
Lucky you, yes. But we're talking about seasonal affective disorder. And I just kind of want to regroup for a minute here in the second half of the program, Jennifer, and remind us again, if someone listening right now thinks that they might be suffering from this, what kind of things might they have as symptoms? What might they be experiencing?
They're going to be experiencing basically the symptoms of depression.
Okay.
Lack of motivation, sad feelings, a feeling of numbness sometimes, social withdrawal, either oversleeping or undersleeping, overeating or undereating, and at worst case scenario, loss of functionality. Can't even make yourself work, can't make yourself engage with anyone. Life just falls apart. And worst case scenario, suicidal thoughts and sometimes behaviors. So, yeah. Serious stuff.
This is very, very serious, very serious.
Yeah.
So if people listening, someone listening right now might be feeling these symptoms, it could be depression. It could be this particular subtype of depression that often happens at this time of the year. So
let me say this, that often people will start developing these types of symptoms and then they will engage in something that I would call emotional reasoning, where they look at the way they feel and they draw conclusions based on the way that they feel. So I feel like life isn't worth living, therefore it must not be worth living. And what helps people in a situation like that is pointing out to them, your emotions could be the result of brain chemistry, and this could be a seasonal issue, and come springtime you'll start to feel like living again.
Interesting.
So you can help them sort of distance themselves from those feelings rather than over-identify with them and to draw too much from them, to make too many assumptions based on those feelings. And that can really break the continuum and help them get past it. But what happens when people aren't aware of things like this is they'll get those really sad feelings and they don't even realize it's brain chemistry stuff going on, that they have seasonal affective, and they'll think, well, my life just isn't worth living, and they'll sometimes take their life, God forbid.
It's tragic,
Yeah, that's why I do psychoeducation. That's why I help people try to understand how their brain works. And, here's the thing is, like, we have, our existence is corporeal. We experience life in these physical bodies. And we're subject to the limitations and liabilities of the corporeal existence. So we can get physically wounded or killed. And our brain, even though it houses our mind and our character, it's still subject to the infirmities of physical organs. And so that's why the more we know about the brain, the better we can take care of it. The easier time we'll have with the whole character building process and relationship building process and all the other things that we're attempting in life. So, yeah.
That's incredibly valuable, and I love that phrase, emotional reasoning. So maybe if we're feeling, particularly at this time of the year, like life is just at its worst and everything is just at the bottom and we see everything sort of darkly, that's our brain. It's not necessarily our reality. That's our brain chemistry telling us that that's what's happening. And in a few short months, everything might look completely different. So, if a person sort of has this experience year after year, would you advise them, don't make major decisions at this time of year? Would
Okay,
that be
really good
part of it?
point.
Yeah.
And learn how to accept this is what happens to me during this season. So
Right.
let's just sketch out here a perfect storm here, or sort of a confluence of factors. Let's call her Edith. And Edith, in the colder, darker months, spends a lot of time inside, doesn't get as much sunlight exposure, starts to feel quite glum, has some of the symptoms of depression, but then she has to go see her family at Christmas time, and her uncle, who abused her when she was a child, is there, and the family won't let her talk about it, and so it's secondary trauma because she's not only been abused by him, but she's been validated by her family, who's supposed to protect her. And as a result of that encounter, for a couple months afterwards, she always feels this shockwave, this post-traumatic stress. If Edith can come to a place where she realizes, this is just A plus B equals C. This is not Edith being a failure or Edith being unstable. It's just Edith being a human being who has had childhood abuse and is suffering seasonal affective disorder for chemical reasons. And because it runs in my family, because I'm a female, if she can know those things, and she can distance herself from what she's going through, and she can have hope that the clouds will break eventually and she will feel better. It can make a huge difference when people know what's going on, and they can distance themselves from it a little bit.
Yeah. Oh. What you're doing in helping people find that place, Jennifer, that's wonderful work. It's a wonderful ministry that you are doing to help people see that broader picture and not kind of get buried in the moment of what they're experiencing. It's wonderfully valuable.
And I have raised emotional reasoning to an art form in my own life, and it wasn't until I started studying these things that I realized, wow, I don't have to assume that I'm a train wreck just because I feel like one.
Sure.
I can feel like one because sometimes those feelings are because of what I ate for lunch, or the music they're playing over the loudspeaker, or some kind of trigger that happened that I'm not even fully conscious of, or maybe the weather, and I'm going to feel the way I feel, but that's not who I am. It's just the way I feel.
It's very liberating to think of it that way. Very, very liberating.
Very.
It's powerful.
Yeah. So this is one of the most important features of treatment of SAD is that people manage their stress levels, and if part of that is realizing, look, during this season of the year, I don't manage stress as well as I normally do, and so maybe I shouldn't make any major life decisions during this time.
Right.
And then, of course, prayer, giving things, making even more of an effort to give things to God and to trust in a Heavenly Father that cares for us, even though we don't always feel Him near, just by faith accepting that is a reality. Another thing that I would do with people is teach them how to deep breathe, because deep breathing can be very calming and very helpful to the brain.
Okay. So deep breathing. Okay, wonderful.
It's a good stress management tool.
Yeah.
And another big one is self-care. What I mean by self-care, a lot of times when people get depressed, they will start to self-indulge. They'll either get into various addictions, or they'll eat or watch media that isn't uplifting, or whatever they do to sort of escape their negative feelings. But then they'll feel worse as a result of doing those things because they wasted time, or they did something immoral, or they got fat, or whatever happened as a consequence of that behavior. So that's self-indulgence. But self-care, it's similar to self-indulgence in the sense that it feels good in the moment, but it doesn't have bad side effects. It doesn't hurt you or anyone else. So self-care is choosing to do things that are going to make you feel good, but that aren't going to rise up and bite you. So things like exercise, things like making healthy, nutritious meals that you enjoy, things like planning social events with people you actually like. It's not self-care to go talk to the aunt that you have to grit your teeth through the entire conversation. It's self-care to be with someone you really like.
Someone who makes you feel better rather than the obligatory. Right. Yeah.
So that's what I call self-care, and that's a very important skill for people with any any kind of depression or anxiety to learn how to care for yourself. You are the steward of your body and your emotions and your mind, and learn how to be kind to yourself.
You know, so does that then, if a person sort of has a pattern of that self-indulgence as a way of trying to cope with their depression or their sad, does that self-care then help them sort of to maybe replace those bad habits or bad routines with positive ones?
Yeah, the reason we eat so much sugar is because we don't eat enough fruit. If people will sometimes just do the thing that's good for them, they won't even want to do the thing that's bad for them. So it's a very proactive way of sort of heading addiction off at the path and keeping bad habits from setting in when you choose to develop good habits that are both gratifying and uplifting.
Yeah. And then you have these positive effects that sort of build on, and rather than, as you described, the negative, which is the guilt and maybe even the shame that comes with the self-indulgence. So someone, let's say we talked about Edith earlier. She was a hypothetical person. So Jennifer, if Edith were to walk into your office and she were to sit down with you, would you talk her through these things we've just been talking about? Going for a walk, the self-care, understanding that she's not a failure, that it's a chemical response going on in her mind. Are there some other practical things that you would share with Edith to help her get through this?
Most deaths. There would be an exercise program we put in place, even if she's, not inclined to exercise, or just have her do some walking. We'd also talk through some of the trauma, and a lot of times trauma can be resolved with talk therapy. It's thought that the reason people experience post-traumatic stress reactions is because their brain is trying to hold on to history.
Interesting.
And because we are very, as human beings, very inclined to archive history. We don't want to let go of history. That's why there's all these history books and history documentaries, and we want to hold on to what happened. And that's true of our personal history as well. So people will often hang on to it. And if they can tell another person and that person writes it down, then they have a sense that I know where to find it, I can let go. And they will be able to let go of it. So we would talk through the trauma and try to work through that to where she wasn't so triggerable. Maybe even work through, find out if there was any susceptibility or openness in the family members to talk about the abuse and deal with it within the family system. It kind of depends on the system. Sometimes there's an openness, sometimes not. But we would try to work through that and come to the most constructive place in response. And maybe she would get to the place where she didn't want to be around the uncle anymore. That's a viable choice. If someone's abused you, you really don't have to be around them. I don't think. And then, if all else fails, there's always antidepressant medication. Those will chemically raise serotonin levels. This Dr. Rosenthal tested Wellbutrin, which is one of the, I think it's an SNRI drug. It's one of the drugs that raises serotonin levels. And he said that if it was begun in the fall, it would often prevent seasonal affective. I use those medications last resort rather than first resort, but sometimes people really need them. There are people that just seem to be chemically set up to need antidepressants at least for a period of time.
Well, Jennifer, you've painted a picture of how you would help Edith, and I think it's very, very helpful and very encouraging. We're going to take a short break. Stay with us here. We're going to come right back and talk a little more about seasonal affective disorder right after this short message here on Disclosure.
Creation, evolution. Where did the world come from? Where did you come from? Were you created in an instant? Did you evolve from another animal or life species? These are issues that are discussed in classrooms, textbooks, and sometimes around your break table at work, when the conversation suddenly turns serious. These kinds of questions are answered in our free Discover Bible guides. These 26 beautifully illustrated guides cover all the major themes of the Bible, and they answer some of the hardest questions of life. You can get your free copy just for the asking by contacting me. Go to VOP.com and click on the tab that says Study. That's VOP.com, the tab that says Study, or phone me, 888-456-7933. That's 888-456-7933 for your free Discover Bible Guides, available just for the asking.
Welcome back to Disclosure. I'm Jean Boonstra, and today Jennifer Jill Schwerzer and I have been talking about something that I think is really important to look at, especially at this time of the year, and that's seasonal affective disorder, also known as SAD, which is a very appropriate acronym, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Perfect.
Yes.
Couldn't be better.
Couldn't be better.
Yeah.
Well, Jennifer, we've talked a lot about, and you've shared some wonderful, wonderful information here, and I'm very thankful for your knowledge, your willingness to be here and share it. Some of the symptoms of this disorder, which you describe as a subtype of depression, some of the approaches that an individual can take, and also like that just before the break, you talked about the fact that there is medication available. You know, I wonder sometimes if we're afraid to even talk about the fact that sometimes medication is a necessary option for people who are suffering from depression and SAD. You said that that is a last resort for you, which I really appreciate. I think that's a balanced approach as a Christian counselor.
Yeah, I had clients where I can think of one where we tried everything, and this individual was very conscientious, very motivated to make all the lifestyle changes that for some people are quite dramatic in their effect on raising mood. And for some reason, it just wouldn't turn around. And they finally, as a last resort, went on a mood elevating, one of the antidepressants, I think it was an SSRI drug. Those are called selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. So
Okay.
They keep the brain from reabsorbing serotonin, so there's more circulating serotonin in the synapses in the brain.
Interesting.
And so it just basically raises the serotonin level of the brain. And those are some of the drugs. They do have side effects, but the side effects aren't as catastrophic as some of the other drugs. I feel safer with SSRI drugs than most other psychotropic medications.
Right.
And they can treat a fairly broad spectrum of things. So as a last resort, sometimes those are necessary. And this individual went on an SSRI drug and within a month was feeling almost 100% better. It was remarkable. So there's a place for them. Sometimes we have to accept our limitations as human beings, you know.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, something you mentioned earlier when we talked about the perfect storm of what can create seasonal affective disorder. And part of that, you said, was putting together maybe our predisposition toward it. Women are 4 times more likely to suffer from this than men. And then when you add to all of this, the stress. So especially this time of the year, maybe we're still kind of suffering from that post-holiday fatigue. The new year maybe has its challenges. Maybe we're not too excited about what this new year holds. Do you have some suggestions, some practical advice for how to handle stress?
Yeah. I would say this about holidays. Simplify. Simplify. Don't assume that your family expects you to knock yourself out. Be honest with people.
That's good advice.
Can we simplify this year? Can we have a gift raffle, where you take a name out of the hat and you just get one gift instead of a gift for every person? Or, can we just have simple meals? Or there's various ways that you can really simplify what you're doing and focus more on the togetherness factor and less on the sort of the production and the really over-the-top consumerism. I think this is the enemy trying to exhaust, particularly women, who end up being the ones that carry, the lion's share of that burden.
Absolutely.
And so I just encourage women to be assertive, talk to their families and find out ways you can simplify. Find out what are the traditions, what are the things that we do that are indispensable, that are deal breakers, and what are the things we can let go of.
Okay.
And just make your program more simple. Go Christmas caroling or do something enjoyable. Go sledding.
Nice.
One of the funnest
Get outside.
experiences.
Yeah.
One of the funnest experiences I can remember at a Christmas was a bunch of us went out with all the little kids in the family and the big kids, and we all just found a hill and went tobogganing.
Oh, yeah, it's
And
awesome.
it was a complete blast, and all of us agreed that it was just, and it cost nothing.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, we were healthier as a result of it.
Mm-hmm.
We went home and had cocoa, and you know, it was just so simple that it was so much fun. And the more we can do things like that, I think the better.
Well, I like your definition of those things that are kind of deal breakers, and those things that maybe are optional.
That's right.
A few years ago, I realized I was kind of killing myself with all the baking, and I sort of stopped and thought, just because my mother made this, and this, and my mother-in-law makes this, and this, doesn't mean I have to make any of it. And so I let each of our daughters choose their favorite thing, and they make their favorite thing. And so I actually do no baking other than for Christmas dinner, and it was incredibly liberating. And you know what? You're right. If I had continued with that path that I'd been on, no one was really expecting it. I was just wearing myself down for no reason and creating additional stress that was unnecessary. So I love your one word for our holidays: simplify.
Yes, that's so good. And I also like how you delegated, because a lot of times we assume that we have to do it all, and then women can fall into this martyr mentality where, I'm just knocking myself out for all you, and you're so grouchy and irritable and not even enjoying people anymore. What's the point? So if you can delegate sometimes, that can be a huge thing, and people will often take that responsibility and run with it.
Yeah, absolutely.
If we just ask, just ask.
And I can learn more. I know I can. But you're right. You're right. It makes a difference.
Another thing we need to watch for around the holidays is overconsumption of sugar. Sugar will spike the energy level, and it'll mess with your blood sugar, of course, and your insulin. But the post sugar spike high can really feel a lot like depression in and of itself.
Interesting.
So you have this very high level of it. Well, remember, sugar is a white crystalline substance.
Right.
So it's an awful lot like a drug in the way it looks,
Yeah.
And it kind of affects the body that way too. So you get this spike in energy, but then there's a crash. And a lot of times people won't even realize how much that's affecting their mood. So the more natural, simple foods, the more fruits you can enjoy. And, some desserts, because you don't want to have no cookies at Christmas. That would be almost, blasphemous or something. But just not going over the top on that kind of thing, and eating as many healthy foods as possible.
Yeah. And that makes good sense. So the way maybe we alter our regular diets around the holidays and throw in all those extra goodies, that's sort of adding to that perfect storm that makes us feel so terrible.
It is, and that's why we should just all go to Florida.
Yeah.
And just walk at the beach, in the sunshine, and play volleyball and go swimming and just forget the world.
Yeah. Sounds wonderful.
I wish I could make that affordable and doable for everyone, because that is one of the treatments for SAD is a vacation, and raising your serotonin levels and getting that melatonin and getting that sun exposure. It can really help the whole system recover, as long as the process of traveling doesn't undo all of the benefits of the vacation.
The stress of travel, sure. So if you're close enough for a quick drive to Florida, that's the ideal situation. Yeah. So you also talked, Jennifer, a bit about your approach as a Christian counselor when you're talking about treatments for seasonal affective disorder. Part of that you mentioned is prayer. So share with us a little bit, because disclosure, we're a Christian ministry. How does your approach, not only prayer, maybe in other areas, how does your approach as a Christian shape how you help people deal with this disorder?
Right. I'm not trying to be the smartest guy in the room, or I'm not trying to be their lifeline. I'm trying to connect them to Jesus, who will be their lifeline when I have passed off the scene of their lives, because I'm just there temporarily. But a lot of times they can relate to God when they have formed a positive relationship with me. It sort of creates a template. Some people come to counseling and have never had a good relationship in their life, and they have a good relationship with their therapist. We call it a warm therapeutic alliance.
Okay.
And sometimes that can sort of it sort of formats their brain to where they can kind of understand what a relationship with God would be like. But I will, ultimately lead the client to God and encourage them in their own individual prayer life, and then I will pray with the client. I usually do it at the end of the session because we've been talking about various issues, and I'll just, with them, sort of place it all in Jesus' hands. And for some people, that's, really a turning point because they've never really practiced that kind of practical Christianity. So just the whole notion of God being a friend that is anxious to carry our burdens for us and care for us and walk beside us and sort of be with us in our struggles and our sufferings is something that brings a lot of comfort to people.
Yeah. Well, it's sad that you forming those positive relationships might be the first positive relationship they've had, but it shows the importance and the significance of what you're doing as a Christian counselor and being willing to form that bridge almost to help them to see God, to even consider that there is a good God out there. Yeah.
It's very interesting. The very beginning of the Lord's Prayer says, "Our Father which art in heaven, hallowed be thy name." And hallowed means holy or set aside, or it really means different.
Yeah.
Versus common. And then name means character. So basically when you begin to pray to God, this is Jesus' model prayer that he left us. It's like the first thing you say is, God, you're different in character. You're different than anyone I've ever known. So it's like you try to get people to realize that God isn't like their uncle. God isn't like their affectionateless dad or their critical mother or whoever has wounded them.
Sure.
You just open their mind to the reality that God is different. And once you've got them to that point where they're willing to consider a God that's different than anyone they've ever known, it can be the beginning of a whole new chapter of their lives.
Beautiful.
So I really try to get there with people. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Well, Jennifer, we've just got about less than a minute left before we have to wrap up this program. I just want to give you an opportunity to share with our listeners, if someone's listening right now and they've been with us for this, almost an hour, they've heard us describe the symptoms and they feel like they might be suffering from this disorder or maybe a major depressive disorder that looks slightly different from what we've been talking about. What would you recommend to them that their very first step be if they have never taken a step?
I would seek a good counselor. I would look for a Christian counselor, and you can go to my website. I can connect you to Abide Counseling, which is a network of Christian counselors that do distance counseling.
Okay.
But maybe you have one in your community. I would find a good counselor that comes highly recommended by other people. Because, it can be kind of like Russian roulette. You're locked alone in a room with someone. They better be a good person, but you don't always know ahead of time. So it's good if you have a referral.
Sure.
Or someone that knows that person and has had a good experience. I would get with a good counselor, see if you can get a diagnosis, and then start following some of the lifestyle points and work with that person to work through any trauma that might be complicating the situation.
Go from there. Okay.
And just engage in some good old talk therapy and then seek the Lord, and come to know Jesus.
Amen.
Read the Bible.
Well, Jennifer, I really appreciate you being here with me as my guest. And your website, again, is jenniferjill.org. And for those of you listening, you heard Jennifer's advice. If you feel like you might be suffering from this, visit her website. Find someone who can help, because there is a God who is our friend, and he is anxious to be with us. Until next time on Disclosure, I'm Jean Boonstra. Thank you for joining us.